Good morning. You know, there's an old Chinese saying, may you live in interesting times. And I think at this moment, we are living in interesting times. Right across the globe, there are lots of questions being asked about what is the state of the world economy going to be in the next 6 years, 6 months, or even 6 weeks or 6 days. For us in India, we are fortunate that we have a strong domestic economy, which has continued to be one of the fastest growing large economies in the world for some time running now. And that is the bedrock of the strength that we derive from our system. But the global headwinds at this moment are truly a matter of concern. And India has chosen for itself a path which says we want to create neutrality for ourselves in geopolitics while building our strength as a nation which wants to be one with the world. The session that we're trying to address here is global trends and future strategies, resilience and adaptability. I was thinking about these two words. It's interesting. I think adaptability today will buy you a couple of weeks, whereas resilience could buy you a decade to build your own capabilities. And that's one area as a nation. We have now been talking about this for a while. If you think about the last few decades, how India has evolved, how we have turned out as one of the largest economies in the world, from a laggard to amongst the leaders. Increasingly, we see ourselves being invited to the top table. They say, if you want to be successful as a nation state, as a civilization, there are a few factors which need to be in play and in place. You need to have a strong and a growing economy. You need to have the ability to defend yourself. You need to be a player in geopolitics. And you need to have a strong cultural underpinning. So if you think about where we are right now, it's actually interesting. On some of these, we are doing exceedingly well. On some, we still have challenges to address. As global headlines become global headwinds, we have started to look both inwards and try to see how India can diversify its global outreach in markets far beyond the ones which we have addressed conventionally and traditionally. So we have an interesting panel here to address some of the questions which are, I presume, in everybody's mind. We have Suneeta Reddy, who is president of AIMA and the MD of Apollo Hospitals, the leading healthcare institution of this country, the first organized large hospital chain India saw. We have Sanjay Kirloskar on my right, who has an amazing company building systems that supply pumps and water flow systems to the world so you can handle floods and you can handle droughts. We have Vishal Kampani, who is the person with his finger on the pulse of what is happening in the world of finance. JM Finance, one of the most respected Indian finance houses. So this is an interesting panel which looks at the economy from very, very different perspectives. So they could, I'm sure, give us an insight into what they believe is the current state, where we are going, and what we ought to be doing to get there. So Suneeta, let me start with you. we have spoken of India's services being the big engine of growth. And it has been the backbone of the growth. And we have continued to struggle with build manufacturing at a higher percentage of the GDP than we've had for a while. It's working. So as the focus shifts to ensuring that agriculture gets better, manufacturing gets a bigger share of the GDP, where do you think services would stand in the coming decade from where we are at this moment?
I think this is probably the ideal time to focus on services. For many years and for good reasons, we said that we need to step up manufacturing. And that has happened. To a certain level, it's happened. But the Indian services industry has great potential. And I say this for two reasons. The first is that if you look at our biggest advantage, it is the demographic dividend. And I think that creating jobs to make sure that this becomes a dividend rather than weighs India down is a must do. But it's also an opportunity. So skilling definitely is an agenda that the government will focus on, but independently as institutions that we need to do. Because as you look at services, the growth has been, it's been growing at 11 to 15%. And this has contributed significantly to our exports. So as a country, 60% urban consumption, 60% of our GDP comes from having a very strong India market. And 40% is really what we think could be, is trade, and probably 90 billion coming from the US. But I think we can make up this 90 billion by exporting services. And services, it's just not what the IT companies are doing, but just going beyond that thinking and saying that, we have pools of experience, we have the Northeast, we have people that we can train in healthcare, where you can actually export our knowledge, leverage our knowledge, and move to aging populations, say Japan, to countries where they just don't have enough of trained people. So this is a huge opportunity. I also think that, as we think of, and I'm thinking in terms of first, how do we make up this deficit that we're losing by the US-India? I think medical value travel is a huge opportunity. So training in the healthcare space is something that we are very focused on. It's not just me, I think it's the industry that is focusing on. It's a $100 billion opportunity by 2030. India should get 20% of that. So $20 billion line of sight established. Just moving beyond that, I think the use of AI, where we've got domain knowledge, we've had service industries, big companies who.
I'm going to come back to you for a more specific question on AI. I have an idea. If you don't mind, my suggestion is let's keep it conversational. So if you keep your answers short, we will be able to get more in. And any of you have a question, feel free to ask as well, because we'll roll in the audience soon into the conversation as well. So Sanjay, to you. So one of the questions that's been raised is that India needs to indigenize more. Most nations need to indigenize more, but because of the current situation, so you are a global player. You don't operate only in India. Have you built design capability in here to be able to manufacture all of the components of the most sophisticated products that you make in India so that you can meet the needs of all of the markets? Or are you still dependent on some components or designs coming from overseas?
I'm probably one of the luckier people in this room, in the sense I'm fourth generation. And my great-grandfather was the guy who started the business. And his desire was to make India self-reliant. He started his business in a village. And from that village, he made India's first pump, India's first diesel engine, India's first electric motor, India's first machine tool, without foreign collaboration. And he was a person who was able to gather people who could help, come out with more and more products. I think that's been the philosophy of the company. we import very little. In fact, we were one of the institutions in India that were under sanctions in 1998. And since then, we have actually stayed away from the US. And we really import maybe 2 or 3% of what we require. And that's raw materials, which sometimes are not made in India, right? But what we've done over a period of time is design globally competitive products. And I'm a firm believer in innovation and investing in R&D. We spend, it's small by global standards, but I guess large by Indian standards, about 2%. But we also have R&D facilities in Europe and in the United Kingdom, which I think doesn't consider itself to be part of Europe anymore. But the idea is to design products for the world. We were very lucky in the 70s that my grandfather, when he was running the business, he got into arrangements to make products for the world with a British company, which we now own and is Britain's largest pump company, and a French company. So it's in our DNA to make products for the world.
So you've been a global player for a while. Yeah. So the government has done two pretty interesting shifts. One in direct taxes a little bit earlier, and now in indirect taxes. So now they're saying the ball is in your court. That's what they're telling industry. Now you go on and run with it. And Vishal, we've actually been fortunate that through various cycles that the economy has seen, the markets have seen, liquidity has remained pretty good. FII has come in, pulled out, come back in, DIIs have come in. So the question keeps getting asked is, how resilient are we to a major global shock in terms of liquidity in our markets?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you for having me here. I think one big change that India has seen in the last 5 years is actually the rise of domestic capital. At least in my career of 27 years, I've never seen the strength of domestic capital markets the way we've seen in the last 5 years. And if you go back to the pre-COVID era, it was always FPI or foreign portfolio flow dependent in terms of companies wanting to raise capital. And there were periods of time where we could not even get a small size IPO done if there was no foreign capital available to buy into the IPO. And that's completely changed. Every single transaction today is led from the front by domestic investors, largely mutual funds or even insurance companies, and even family offices. So a big fundamental change. Also, it's been underestimated in a big way that the domestic capital would have this kind of size and strength. So I think the question is around, do we remain stable? If you look at year to date, we've had almost 145,000 crores of selling by foreign investors in the equity market. We've had 45,000 crores of buying in the debt market from foreigners, but the markets have been flat. Just going back 5 years, if this were to have happened, the markets would have been down 20%. So it just talks about the resilience which the domestic equity investments through mutual funds, through retail, through HNI has been game-changing for India.
Thank you. They say you should climb where tariffs can't reach. IP, design, technology, and more companies, businesses across the globe are looking at AI, some even without quite understanding what it can do. There's a blind rush at this moment to introduce AI into business. You are one of the leaders right now, Suneeta, in bringing AI into clinical ops. So where do you think you're building the moat? Is this in documentation? Is it in triage? Is there a moat this will allow you to build for your operations? So what kind of use are you making of AI right now? It's also a bit of a mystery for most, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I understand it could be a mystery. But at Apollo, what we are doing is using our 40 years of database of knowledge. And more importantly, it's heterogeneous Indian knowledge because our demographics, we are a heterogeneous population. So we are using this to build a clinical intelligence engine which will support decision making for doctors, which will enable primary healthcare centers to really deliver a solution, sometimes a medicine, sometimes a need to go to the hospital. But the important thing is that we're using it in 3 aspects. One, in clinical decision making. Second, to make geography history, because we're able to leverage this and move into the smaller towns of India. And I think, at Apollo, telemedicine has done that really well. We're able to serve remote locations using AI, where we're able to come out with the diagnosis. In some areas, we're also providing spectacles because we're able to use AI to find, what type of spectacles are required for the consumer. So clearly the focus here, it is a risk. And I think understanding where this risk from is really in that black box, in how it's coded. So while we can, spread it out across India, we have to be very careful about how this whole system is hardwired. Many companies have taken a US product, like we've worked with Microsoft to fine-tune ours, and I think that is a huge advantage.
So if the conversation seems to be all over the place, it is designed to be. We are actually trying to cover as many things as we can in this 40-45 minutes of a conversation. Sanjay, let me come back to you. So one of the big issues facing us as a planet, as a people, is global warming. It is real. It is here. We can see the impact in the number of volcanic eruptions, the number of floods, the number of droughts. How do we build resilience in our cities, in our systems, both from floods, as we are seeing right now? We are actually in the middle of it. We are seeing landslides take place all across north and west. We have a tragic situation taking place right now. And on the flip side, we start seeing droughts very, very quickly the moment the situation changes. What do you think we can and we must do to build resilience in tackling climate in a much more eco-friendly manner?
I think we've forgotten that we've inherited this planet from our ancestors, and it was a wonderful place to live.
Actually, we inherited from our children.
From one chicken. And I think all we need to keep in our minds is that we have to leave it a better place for our kids, right? And whatever we do, whether it's our processes or our products, they have to be designed keeping that in mind. For the longest time, the way development is happening in our country, I think the floods that you see in cities are not because of rain, they're man-made. Right? Because development has taken place in a manner where natural floodplains or natural channels have been blocked. And I think that's what needs to be kept in mind, that we need to develop in a far better situation than, in a far better way than we have been developing our country. As far as the rest of the world is concerned, I don't know what's going to happen with us going back to oil and gas and coal. I'm a firm believer in nuclear energy. I believe it's far safer. I don't know how many people are aware that in India, every year, thanks to air pollution caused by power plants, something like 100 to 150,000 people die early. And I think we need to move very quickly away from that. Government's policies for sustainability, for renewables, I think are very good, but I believe that we also need to have a very strong nuclear policy, and we need to bring on nuclear power very quickly.
I couldn't agree more. And we need to ensure that any development that we do, any new growth, any new expansion, any new investment needs to keep the environmental degradation in mind. We need to be sensitive to the needs of the ecosystem, the entire ecosystem around us. They also say no crisis should be allowed to go waste, Vishal. Do you think this is an opportunity for us to unleash the next wave of reforms on factor reforms? labor reforms, land reforms, market reforms, agriculture reforms. We have a few of them still left to do before you can completely see the, as they keep saying, the entrepreneurial spirits the animal spirits of the entrepreneur needs to get unleashed. How do you get to a place where you have a genuinely and open and level playing field for all enterprise?
Yeah, that's a great question again. So I think, as some people say, when pushed to a wall, you can actually perform at your best, and that's probably true for India today, being pushed to a wall from a geopolitical perspective. I think we need to perform our best. But I must also congratulate the Indian entrepreneur. I mean, the Indian entrepreneur who survives and thrives, goes through a very hard challenges business, building a business in India. And if you have support of reforms, which we expect continuously over the next sort of half decade which we have left, I think the strength of the entrepreneur will be magnified. There has been a bit of a slowdown on the investment and capex side. But that is a function of demand. I think we've seen some bit of slowdown in demand, and these GST reforms recently, which we have seen, will definitely help in boosting some demand. But at the end of the day, corporates will invest, corporates will grow when they see more reforms and they see demand. So we have to keep that in mind when we are, leashing out reforms as well.
Sure, please.
Well, we think of reforms. The one issue that we have to think deeply about is that some of these reforms need to happen at a state level. Because if you look at healthcare, education, so how does the center and the state come together to come out with policies that are relevant to industries?
Actually, it's most of them, Suneeta. You're right. You're right to point this out, because when somebody invests in India, they don't actually invest in India. They invest in a village or a town in a state of India. And we do know that being the kind of federal structure we are, many of the regulations are state managed, some are managed by the center, and many are concurrent lists. So what we had recommended to the government a little while ago was, as we have done very successfully in GST, let's build similar bodies, authorities, call them whatever you want. I'm always wary of recommending more government to create more government, because that becomes a problem. But this is one which has worked wonderfully successfully well. Things like education. We have introduced one of the best education policies I've ever seen in the world, and I am quite involved in this area. And it's 5 years old now. It still hasn't seen the light of day in terms of true implementation. And what I'm scared of is that the implementation will be done by the states separately and independently, and you will see the whole thing become patchy. Some will do a fantastic job, I'm sure, because it is a great policy. But not all of them will be able to do the same job. So you'll start seeing a differentiation. So you'll start seeing a different kind of exclusion, people getting left out of the best quality of process of education. So we had recommended take things like agriculture, take things like education, take things like health, create these GST type of cross-state with the center committees to take these on, so that at least as India grows, all of India grows. And that's our challenge, by the way. It's not as if India is not growing. We are the fastest growing large economy in the world. But the growth is quite varied across the country right now. If you see the south and the west of the country, we are growing significantly higher than the north and the east. The east used to be the laggard, but it has improved. Actually, all of India has improved. But the gaps are growing even more right now. So we need to figure out a way to handle this in a manner that we can create a more even growth model. Let me ask you about one more growth area. Insurance has been a game changer for many nations, as it has been for India. But our penetration is still very, very low. We are now talking of not just providing healthcare to all our people. We have launched the largest in the world scheme by the government for insurance, health insurance. At the same time, on the top end, we want to be a destination for health tourism. How do we ensure that we have sufficient capacity to handle this and that we don't fall in the trap that US did because of insurance, and I'm being careful, I'm choosing my words carefully, the high cost and yet not being able to service the needs of the people is a trap that countries like US have fallen in. How can we avoid that trap? Because we are at a very early stage of our growth right now. Can we develop a unique model of our own where we build capacity, we build capabilities, and we build reach? At the same time, we don't load this up with costs that people or the system cannot afford. I'm sorry, it's a big question, but it's also an important question for India because one of the under-addressed areas has been health.
So let me start from what exists now. So if you look at WHO report, we need 3 beds for every 1,000. Right now, India has 1 bed for every 1,000. So before going to MVT, let me talk about India. In India, we have totally, we need to build 42 lakh beds. We have 18 lakh beds. Of that 18 lakh beds, 35% is in the government sector. And 65% is in the private sector. As you look at the private sector, there are only 1.5 lakh beds which are truly private organized, and only 48,000 corporate beds which are, which everyone seems to be talking about because these people, they are listed players, they have high levels of accreditation, and these are the hospitals that are earning foreign exchange. So I think the potential to really grow healthcare in this industry is crucial. One, because it creates capacity to look after all of India. And the best way to do that is the insurance penetration. So as we look at insurance, we must not think of making healthcare expensive because insurance is, taking margins away. We have to look at the whole value chain. And in that value chain, insurance, the hospital supplier, and the doctor plays a very important role. So first look at value chains, and second to look at penetration, and third to create a medical value destination in India by building out more capacity for India and for the rest of the world.